On today's show, Reed Sheppard forcing himself into Rockets starting lineup conversations and how Amen Thompson's new role has actually led to some of the Rockets' defensive regression this season. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network in the nation, your team every single day. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Fridays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then comment, subscribe on YouTube. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. And joining us now is your weekly co-host, NBA draft enthusiast, and diehard Houston Rockets fan, Madison Moore. You can track down on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. And Madison, we're going to be talking little Reed Sheppard, little Amen Thompson on today's show. Kind of getting into both of these guys, kind of how they've performed so far this season and kind of their respective roles on this Rockets team and how we're kind of seeing their roles grow and evolve and adapt, and kind of some of the good, a lot of the good that we've seen out of Reed Sheppard through the early going of the season, as well as some of the downsides from what we've seen out of Amen Thompson because of him trying to adapt to this new role, being used a lot more heavily on ball this season, and how that's maybe impacted other elements of his game, in particular his defense, which was, first team all NBA defense last season. It feels like, he's taken a little bit of a step back in that regards this season. We're going to talk about Amen a little bit later in the show, but let's start here with Reed Sheppard, man. Reed's been playing out of his mind over these last, 5-6 games. We're seeing him with each and every single game, building confidence, getting more, kind of growing more assured of himself out there on the floor, making moves, kind of hunting his shot at times, hunting his own offense, looking like he belongs is one of the best ways that I can kind of describe it. When he's out there playing alongside, talents like Kevin Durant, like Alperen, Sengun, he looks like he's fitting in with those guys. And he's a very complementary piece for this Rockets team offensively, playing off of the gravity of those two guys in particular. And I think at this point, it almost feels like the discussion around Reed is less about it's less now like, will he ever be good enough to be like a starting caliber player? And suddenly the conversation is very drastically shifted to how soon will Reed Sheppard be starting for this Rockets team? So what's your read on where pun not intended. That was unintentional. God, wow. I'm in my Reggie Miller bag. That was accidental. All right. At this point, how soon do you feel like it could be before Reed is starting for this team? What do you like or dislike about kind of the dynamic right now with him coming off the bench, with Josh Okogie still in the starting lineup? And do you almost feel like there's a level of like Reed kind of forcing the issue and kind of forcing himself into this conversation of like, man, like you can't keep bringing him off the bench because he's so damn good?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a little bit more time. I think the game is slowing down for Reed, but I think he has to succeed at his role for at least 20 games, 10, barring injury, of course, right? At least 15 to 20 games where this guy is just, really changing the game and impacting the game at the rate that he is. He has to do that consistently over and over again, because it's a different monster when teams begin to game plan for you when you're in the starting lineup. You have to display a certain level of consistency for the coaching staff to make such a drastic move like that. And with Tari, especially with Tari being out, it's nice to have that spark plug off the bench. Somebody you can count on to just give your team a different change of pace, right? He really is giving this team a shock and a jolt of energy coming off the bench. And I think his defense right now, for where it is, his hands and everything, it has tremendously improved, but I don't know how effective it will be against starting lineups, especially when they go to targeting him. And that's what we kind of seen in that Magic game, is that Reed was super effective throughout the beginning and middle parts of the game. But then when stuff got kind of tight, Orlando went to hunting him. And then you start to see, even though he has improved defensively, you still start to see his shortcoming, especially against the best in the league, and that's the starters.
Yeah, those 3 straight possessions with Franz Wagner where he just straight up ISO'd on Reed and was just like, all right, well, you're in the torture chamber now. Like, he's 6'8", like, good luck trying to guard him in isolation. And there was, there's not really anything else the Rockets could do in those moments other than, Reed was just on an island, unfortunately, and had to try and hold Franz, and it led to 3 straight fouls on basically 3 straight possessions in a row.
And then Ime tried to go to zone to protect him, and the Rockets are just trashing zone right now. You know what I mean? And that's an issue, right? And so until Reed, and it's not to be pessimistic about Reed. I think we should be optimism. I think he's taken a real meaningful step as a defensive player, but he was just so far back that he's going to have to take 1 or 2 more steps before he's going to be starter level.
It certainly feels that way. And there's looking back at like these last, 5 games from Reed Sheppard, where it kind of feels like that's where he took like a very noticeable step forward. Maybe you say 6 games, right? Where it goes back to like that Memphis game or even a couple of the other earlier ones, but there's just, it really feels like he's caught his stride over these last like 5 or 6 games. And over the last 5 games, he's averaging 16.4 points per game to go along with 3.2 assists, 2.6 rebounds. And he's doing it all in right at 27 minutes per game. His shooting splits are absolutely nuts. He's shooting 53% from downtown, 65% from 2-point land. Just unbelievable efficiency from him. And you see it right on a nightly basis. Like it's gotten to a point, Madison, where when Reed pulls from anywhere on the floor, I'm like, it's going in. Like, this is like, it's exciting, right? He is becoming must-watch TV on a team that features Kevin Durant, Alperen, and Sengun. Like, he is like one of the most exciting parts of this team through the early part of the season. It feels eerily reminiscent, to me at least, of, and I think to many others, or to a few others at least, is that, similar to Amen Thompson and how impactful and effective he was his rookie season, and then last season, right, his sophomore campaign, where it got to a point last year, and hopefully it won't take all the way through, like, Reed Sheppard's. I guess we're looking at this as kind of like his rookie season, so I'm not going to call this his like real sophomore campaign. But it got to a point where Amen Thompson was so good for the Rockets coming off the bench that he was getting, 30 plus minutes a night off the bench. But that's really hard, because if you're playing 30 plus minutes, if you're clocking in 34, 35, 36 minutes a night, but you're doing it off the bench, you're almost artificially capped, because if you spend the first anywhere from 4 to 5 to 6 minutes sitting on the bench to start a game, then that means if you're getting 30 plus minutes a night, the rest of the way, you're playing 30 of the next available 40 or 42 minutes left in the game. And that's really hard on anybody. Amen Thompson was able to kind of handle that workload because he's a freak of nature athlete, and he's like in the top like 99.9th percentile of like, freak athlete human beings on the planet. So he was able to handle that workload. But I just wonder with Reed and how effective he's been, right, is at some point, does Ime Udoka have to look at the balance and say, you know what, I need Reed out there, or I'm feeling like Reed needs to be out there for more than 30 minutes a night because he's just that good offensively? And then at what point does he feel the need to pull the trigger and potentially move him into the starting lineup in place of Josh Okogie? The downside to that whole conversation being, as you already alluded to, right, the defense, right? Okogie gave the Rockets what they were sorely missing, in particular losing, right, Dillon Brooks from, last season. Is he gave them another point of attack defender. He gave them another tone-setting defensive piece to start some of these games. And even with the addition of Josh Okogie in the starting lineup, this Rockets defense still isn't what it was last season, unfortunately. The defense has left a little bit to be desired this year.
Yeah, the defense has definitely taken a step back. And I know we'll talk about some reasons when we get into Amen Thompson in the next couple segments about that. But I think it also shows the reason why Okogie has to stay in the lineup and why Reed has to first prove himself in his role but how important balancing that lineup. There's definitely enough offense in the starting lineup. And for Reed to get into the starters and really force that issue, he's going to have to bring something that the starters do not have. And that is, I think, he has to first be a competent enough defender, but also he has to bring initiation chops that settles this team down, right? And that is the one part of his offensive game that Reed has not necessarily had to show as much of during this stretch. He's really just come in as this almost like a pseudo shooting guard, like a offensive fulcrum where he's looking for a shot, but he's yet to really fold in the playmaking.
He's been a really good like secondary creator, kind of like off of some of the other actions, and you can see like the court vision on display. He's got good playmaking instincts and kind of has the right idea of certain plays to make, but he's not having to do all of the heavy lifting, right? Where he's running the offense start to finish.
Exactly, but I think that's what this starting lineup needs. It not necessarily to run it start to finish, but to really bring a sort of organization to it, right? And I think if he can start to build on that, he's already got the offensive game, and now that he's become such an electric threat from 3-point line over 50%, right? Now he'll be able to leverage that. He's already starting to leverage that to get easy layups at the basket, but I expect him to leverage that to start making plays for others as well, and really starting to dissect teams. So I'm just really excited to see how this game is slowing down for him. It first started with his offense. I felt his offense really started in that Memphis game, but his defense was still really bad. But now his defense has started to catch up with the offense as well. And so I think he needs to continue to build on these skill sets as he gets comfortable. And I'm really excited because of his age. He really has a chance to really take off this year.
Coming up, we're going to talk about some of the reasons the Rockets defense feels like it's regressed this season. And in particular, what's going on with Amen Thompson and kind of his role and the evolving situation there for this Rockets team. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Rippling. Look, if you're a business owner, here's the truth. SaaS promised to make work easier, but now the average company is buried by hundreds of apps that slow down your teams and simply don't work together. That's not SaaS, that's SAD, software as a disservice. That's why you need Rippling. Rippling is the unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance, all in one place. They've helped millions of businesses replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. From onboarding to payroll to IT access, it all runs automatically and perfectly in sync. And right now you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/lockedonnba. Learn more at rippling.com, rippling.com/lockedonnba. That's rippling.com/lockedonnba for 6 months free. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Look, you and I make decisions every single day, but on Prize Picks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this season, whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere that Prize Picks operates, including California, Georgia, and even Texas. This season, I've been hanging out on Prize Picks. I've been making my picks with Alperen, Sengun, and Kevin Durant. I'll tell you what, the points, rebounds, assists picks for Alp, going more on those, hasn't disappointed so far this season, for me at least. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Madison, one of the unfortunate kind of storylines from this Rockets season, despite the fact that their offense is humming along and looks way better than I think anybody could have predicted this season. We knew it would get better by adding Kevin Durant. We didn't know that it was going to get this much better, being the number one offense in the NBA and holding fast to that number one offense so far. But the defense, right? It's leaving a little bit to be desired. They're still floating around, they're still within the top 10, but this team has not had that kind of ability that last year's team had to just flip the switch and take over and dominate a game on the defensive side of the ball. I honestly don't think we've seen that maybe like once this season, if that, but we really haven't seen a stretch where this team just pitches an absolute shutout where they just shut down an opposing team, hold them scoreless for a 2, 3, 4-minute stretch over the course of a game. Now, the issue is with last year's team is like they'd hold a team scoreless, but then they would also only put up like 4 points in that stretch because they couldn't score the ball, right? That was the problem. Yeah. Now, this team has all the firepower in the world, it feels like, but they cannot buy a stop when they need one. And that in and of itself is really concerning because you know that this, an Ime Udoka-led team wants to have a defensive identity. Ime is certainly, he joked about it the other day, he's not very happy about some of these final scores, the 130s to 120 finishes or whatever, but a win is a win. And unfortunately, right, one of the kind of maybe somewhat underreported storylines this season is Amen Thompson feels like he's taken a bit of a step back defensively. And there are reasons for that, but just I'll hand you the reins. What do you think right now about where Amen Thompson is at defensively and kind of how it relates to the Rockets' struggles as a team defense at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we have one of the most dynamic forces of nature on defense on this team, and he's just been a good defender this year. Nothing more, nothing less. He's not been the dynamic impact on the game defensive stopper, put him on anybody and shut them down. Switchable Swiss Army knife that we're used to seeing. And a lot of that is probably tied to his increased role of bringing the ball up. A lot of focus on that area, making sure he gets guys in and out of his sets, making sure he initiates plays, making sure he's doing the right thing to get everybody else involved. I think it's really unselfish because I actually think he should be a bit more aggressive offensively as well. But I think you can tell that Amen is really just trying to learn this new position, and it's taking him out of what we're used to seeing when he had this specific role as a defensive stopper, as a do-it-all, everything. Hey, we're putting you on the best player, and you're going to stop them, right? And that role, and that's why roles are so important, right? And so now Amen Thompson has a change of role, and it is not that it's not his focus, but he has other focuses now. You know what I mean? And that, I think, is starting to show up in his game. It really takes his offense back because the defense is how Amen got out into transition, how it sparks his particular offense in and of itself. Because that's probably his second best way to get buckets outside of cutting, off ball as a release valve in the dunker spot, right? And so when you take that huge region off, it's very easy for teams to take him out of the game offensively, which we've seen these last couple games. And once again, the amount of zone we're playing, right? Zone does not allow guys to get in a rhythm, really take that challenge one-on-one defensively. And because we're playing so much zone, Amen is not able to do that. But it also might be helpful for his rest because he is doing a lot of things out there on the Rockets court. But unfortunately, I think it's taking away from how special he is defensively. And that's something I think the Rockets staff are going to have to face and really come to terms with, as well as Amen Thompson, of what type of team do we want to be, right? We lost Dillon Brooks, which was the emotional leader for our defense, and now we don't have an emotional leader, the guy that gets you fired up about playing defense. Who's going to be that guy on this team? And I think it might serve the Rockets better because we know Amen has that type of toughness, as Tyler Hero. He knows what, he got that dog in him. You know what I mean? But sometimes he's still a young player. So sometimes you got to grab those young guys and say, hey, I need that oomph. I need an emotional leader. I need a spearhead of this defense. And Josh Okogie has tried and helped the Rockets a lot with that. But let's be real. Amen Thompson needs to have that role, right? And y'all need to ask Jabari Smith to get in there with him. You know what I mean? Jabari is still just a good defender and not an amazing defender. And he also needs to step up as a young player. And so I really like them guys to take ownership of this defense and become those players because they have the talent to do so.
It's so tough because it feels like a warranted investment in what is ultimately the future of this team, right? And Amen Thompson's future ceiling as a player, and the future ceiling of this team as a whole. Because if you give him these developmental reps, you give him all this, all these on-ball reps right now, and you kind of take some of the bruises and the lumps along with it. But, by season's end, or even by the midway point of the season, there's probably going to come a point where Amen is such an excellent basketball player. He's got such a great mind for the game that I don't doubt his ability to eventually figure it out and be able to understand his role offensively better than what he's doing right now, and really settling into being a primary facilitator for this team, a primary ball handler, all of that, to where it'll look a lot more cleaned up after another 30 or 40 or 60 games of reps this season. But at the same time, it's kind of that dual role, right, of balancing the expectations, like you kind of already pointed out, is, and we saw kind of the inverse of this, and I pointed this out, on social media, but it's kind of the inverse of what we saw with Alperen Sengun last year, where Alperen Sengun put so much focus on elevating his defensive game last season that his offense took kind of a step back, right? He wasn't as focused on finishing around the rim, and he was, devoting so much energy and effort defensively. He talked about that during a couple of his summer interviews in Turkish, talking about how he spent so much time focused on that side of the ball. He wasn't as, honed in offensively. And then we've seen exactly what happened when he spent an entire offseason kind of reworking and fine-tuning his offense and focusing on the shooting. Now he comes in and he's got a 3-point, like he's a sniper all of a sudden, right? So these players they're not video game players. They're not guys where you can just hold down right trigger and expect them to go 110% all the time, right? They have a limited battery, right? And they can only do so much. That's why you see oftentimes star players, the James Hardens and the LeBrons and the Lucas of the world, they take a lot of plays off defensively because they are asked to do so much on the offensive side of the ball. Now, you can argue that whether they're lazy, this and the other thing, whatever, but there are a certain select few two-way guys in the NBA that are able to play the game at an incredibly high level on both sides of the floor without any kind of noticeable drop-off or deterioration in their play. And I think for Amen, this is kind of the beginning stage of his journey, learning how to balance both of these roles. And if the Rockets wanted to just win at all costs right now, Amen wouldn't be getting all this on-ball equity that he's getting right now. He wouldn't be given these opportunities because they know how elite he is in the role that he held previously, like you already kind of talking about before. But by giving him these opportunities, it's going to help the eventual future of this team and turn him into a more well-rounded player because of this opportunity.
Yeah, totally agree, man. And that's the crux of this, is we still have an incredibly talented young player, and you'd like for them to continue to develop. You don't want to put them in a box, right? But I think one of the best things about Amen Thompson has always been his motor since his time in OTE, right? His motor was one of the most amazing things about him. And not to say his motor has decreased, but if anybody should be able to play both sides of the ball at a very high level, this type of athlete is probably one of the guys who should be able to do it. And I do think it just will take some more focus. You know what I mean? I can see he's working hard out there. You know what I mean? But we need that physicality. We need that defensive identity if this team is going to go far in the playoffs this year. You know what I mean? And I appreciate Amen what he's taking on, but it's just going to be a journey for him until he can get that together.
Absolutely. And, at the end of the day, you pointed it out, this Rockets team does need a defensive quarterback, right? They lost their defensive quarterback with Dillon Brooks. Even though Amen Thompson was the team's best defender last year, exactly. Dillon Brooks was the vocal defensive leader. He was the guy that got everybody fired up. And, I think that Jabari is capable of being that guy, because Jabari has no qualms about being vocal. He's one of the more vocal guys on the team. He's not afraid of being demonstrative, of calling guys out, of calling out plays, quarterbacking things. But at the same time, it's very tough to fill that Dillon Brooks sized hole, because Dillon Brooks is kind of one of one, right? There's a reason that he worked so well, and he was such a I won't say devastating loss, but it was a very significant loss to the fabric of what made this Rockets team so special defensively, and not something that just anybody can step into and suddenly do. Like even against the even in the last game again, oh my goodness, who did they just finish playing? Why am I blanking on this? Thank you. I was thinking blue jerseys and I wanted to say Grizzlies and I was like, that's not right. Thank you for the save there. Even against Orlando, right? That game started getting chippy at points, right? And it felt like it had Dillon Brooks been out there with that game getting chippy, it kind of felt like those would have been one of those games where DB like steps in, kind of gets under the enemy's skin, gets fired up, maybe draws a technical, like kind of offsetting text, right, to kind of fire up everybody. We've seen how many of those like scrums did we see over the last 2 years where stuff would get a little chippy and then Dillon would kind of like incite some aggression, and then the Rockets would feast off of that, right? That was their whole team identity. In the game against Orlando, things got a little chippy, but at no point did it like escalate because the Rockets don't have that kind of like aggressor on their defense who kind of gets everybody rolling. And so that part has been kind of maybe the most or one of the biggest factors for the lack of defensive intensity so far this season. And again, you hit the nail on the head. It's got to be one of, if not both, Jabari and Amen need to be able to step up and be more vocal, better leaders on the defensive side, and that's the area that they're going to have to be kind of the defensive anchors, because you got KD and Alperen who are holding it down offensively, right? They're the offensive engines, they're the best players, they're the stars. They're doing their job offensively. You need your other guys to be stars in their roles, like you like to say a lot. And the way that Jabari and Amen can do that is by really shining on the defensive side of the floor, despite some of the other responsibilities that Amen Thompson is being tasked with.
And let me just say, the games that the Rockets have lost or had the most trouble with have been by the Rockets getting out-toughed, right? And this is a cultural change, a cultural shift that has happened in the Rockets team, right? And so who in our young players is going to step up and be that cultural tone setter? And that's what we're calling on Amen Thompson. Amen Thompson, when your shot's not going, where you're not going to have all those opportunities to get downhill and get easy buckets, how are you positively affecting the game? It can't just be with normal good defense. You need to be the superstar defender that you are to get yourself rolling. You need to be that cultural defensive tone setter, and that's what we're looking for moving forward.
Coming up, final segment where we're going to do a quick point guard stock watch for Reed Sheppard and Amen Thompson. We did one before the season started. Now we've got a little bit of a sample size to draw from. How are we feeling about these two guys and their developmental journeys? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Your ambition just met its match with Robinhood. You play for the win, not just on game day, but every day, locking in on every possession, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and even crypto, all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself, expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Today's episode is also brought to you by Rougiette. Let's be real. Making excuses doesn't solve anything. You've heard all the excuses before. It's just stress or I'm tired or it happens to everyone sometimes. When it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support, and that's where Rougiette comes in. Rougiette.com offers fast-acting doctor-prescribed treatment for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rougiette makes it easy to get started. You just connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online. No awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments. If prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your doorstep. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by real doctors. Visit Rougiette.com/LockedOnNBA. That's Rougiette, Rougiette.com/LockedOnNBA to get 15% off your first order. Again, that's Rougiette.com/LockedOnNBA. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNBA so that they know that we sent you. Rougiette. Stop making excuses and start making moves. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Madison, we did one of these kind of point guard stock watch episodes before the season started, and we took a look at Reed Sheppard, Amen Thompson, and JD Davison. We won't talk about JD in this one just because he hasn't played any meaningful minutes so far this season. Although, I mean, it looks like Aaron Holiday is going to get the nod with no Tari Eason, but JD Davison did get recalled from the Vipers, so maybe at some point we'll see some JD Davison minutes down the line. But for right now, we're going to keep the conversation focused on Reed and Amen. Let's start it the way we started the episode, because actually, you know what? Let's just roll with Amen, because we've been talking about Amen. Might as well keep it on him, and then we'll wrap up with Reed. Where do you feel like Amen is at? You know, we talked about kind of the defensive side of things and how his new role and the you know, growing responsibilities in his role offensively has impacted, you know, the other parts of his game and trying to juggle the on ball versus off ball roles and all that. But when he is on ball, when he is initiating the offense, when he's running the show, how do you feel like Amen Thompson has done so far through the early part of the season? How would you evaluate his point guard play?
I think he's actually done a pretty good job. I think Alperen Sengun's the actual point guard, and I think he has done a good job to get Rockets in and out of sets. I think he's one of the better sure handle guys with a sure handle bringing the ball up the court, because we've seen Kevin Durant struggle with ball pressure. We've seen a lot of guys on this team struggle with ball pressure, and I think Alperen Sengun and Amen Thompson have been the best against ball pressure. So in those senses, I think he's done really well. And I think my biggest issue with him is he's not been aggressive enough getting downhill and making plays for others and himself.
He's settling a lot, and that's the thing that I feel like in this first 2 years of his career, I don't think Amen Thompson ever settled. Like Amen, because it's almost like he knows that he needs to be a better outside shooter at some point in his career, and he's maybe making that a little bit more of a focus than it needs to be, a lot earlier than it needs to be, because he's the one guy on this roster that can get downhill at will. Nobody else has a downhill game except for Amen Thompson. Maybe you count Sengun because he drives from the perimeter, but I don't really feel like those are downhill drives. Like Amen Thompson is the one downhill threat on this Rockets roster right now.
Exactly. And we need that ball pressure. We need to see him get into the basket. And that is how he's going to create offense for himself and others. And to me, there's this incredible opportunity for Amen to explore his game. And I think he's playing just a bit too safe right now. I think he's playing it just a bit too safe. He's filling it out. I understand what's going on. It's a long season. But I think right now he's just being safe. And that's going to get us by and win some games. But if you're going to be safe and I don't get to see my outlier tier defense, I have a problem with that. You know what I mean? Be safe and still be the number one defender in the world, right? Don't be safe and then give me just good defense. That trade-off is not a good enough trade-off for me. You know what I mean? So if you're going to play safe, you need to be in the passing lanes. You need to be, you need to be the Amen Thompson that I know defensively, so you can get out and get easy buckets in transition. So you can go and take those assignments. And that is why I'm kind of on the fence. And I think he's got about a C+, B- on the season for his as a point guard so far.
I think I'm kind of more or less around the same, and I have some of those similar gripes. And again, like even, it kind of feels like he's been, slumping a little bit these last few games, unfortunately, getting kind of stonewalled in the half court in particular, really struggling to find ways to be effective in the half court when he's not just playing the baseline game, right? Like when he's playing as a cutter, roaming the baseline, playing out of the dunker spot, playing out of the corners, that's when he's super lethal, right? And you see him kind of like, there's moments in a given game, like think to the overtime against Orlando, right? When he started playing off the baseline again and playing off of that gravity from KD and Sengun, and he had 6 points in overtime because after struggling the whole game, had 6 easy points in overtime, doing what he does incredibly well, which is getting underneath the defense, cutting those little backdoor plays, and finding those seams within the defense to create a passing angle for KD or Sengun or whoever. But when he doesn't get those moments, right, when he's stuck with the ball in his hands and he's got to try and make something out of nothing in the half court, and he drives and then maybe gets stopped, 8 feet away from the basket, 10 feet away from the basket, and settles for a turnaround jumper or kind of a push shot in the lane, or even worse, I think he only took the 1-3 against Orlando, but it was like as such an ill-advised 3, like in that fourth quarter when they were trying to mount their comeback and like they needed some high quality possessions, and like an Amen Thompson 3 at the top of the key is not a high quality possession. That's a you take that shot if there's nothing else available, unfortunately, kind of shot. Because, you know, and I appreciate Amen's confidence and willingness to shoot the ball, because he is going to have to develop that at some point in his career. But it feels like it feels like this is the wrong thing to be trying to develop right at this moment, especially to your point, right? When he is such a threat, or can be such a unique downhill dynamic threat. That's the area that you want to see him just let loose, man. Like, I feel like it's so interesting because with no Fred VanVleet, we knew all of a sudden that three guys, Sengun, Amen, and Reed, were all going to suddenly be tasked with much bigger roles and more responsibility than they ever would have had Fred VanVleet been healthy. And it kind of feels like both Sengun and Reed have kind of like risen to the occasion and kind of like seeing like, hey, all right, we've got opportunities. Let it rip. Let's just do our thing, right? And it feels, to your point, I think you call it playing safe, and I think that is such a perfect way to describe what we've seen from Amen Thompson so far. And what's crazy is, like, we've seen Amen Thompson when he's not playing safe before, when he's just playing his game, when he's just playing off of his instincts and his feel for the game. And that's the Amen Thompson that can go out there and get you 25, 10, and 10 in his sleep when he's just, you know, rolling off his instincts basically in the game. And that's the version of him that we hopefully will see more of as he's kind of settling into this role.
Yeah, man. I definitely think Amen needs to take I think Amen actually started off pretty good. You know what I mean?
Did. No, he had a good start to the season.
But I think, it's telling that his best games were when he's running that back line and as a play finisher, right? Which brings into question the whole point guard thing for him. Like, this guy is such an effective player in this off-ball role as a cutter or whatnot. And it's just, he has to find different ways to be effective as a point guard. And that's what we're saying. And so far, Amen has a lot of room for improvement. But I think it will help him a lot with his confidence and with his impact on the game. There's just stretches where Amen is in the game and it's almost like we don't even feel his presence. You know what I mean? Whereas
previously, you knew when Amen Thompson was on the floor. Yeah, like the Terror Twins, right? He'd check in, and other teams would be like, "Damn it!" Like, now you got to deal with him, right? Here comes Twin, and now he's just out there. And like, again, he's not hurting the team. He's not like doing anything bad. He's just good. But like that's crazy, but because the bar was set so high for him, and we expected like another kind of massive step forward in his game, and it's. I almost don't even want to say he's plateauing, because like you look at the production and like he's gotten better statistically, but I do wonder if how much of what we're seeing from Amen Thompson is him kind of thinking, okay, what we're missing with Fred is the ball security, right? We're missing the guy who can get us into our sets and get good. And unfortunately, that's Fred's game. That's not Amen Thompson's game, right? And Amen Thompson is not going to be a Fred VanVleet style point guard. That is not him at his best. Amen Thompson needs to be a point guard forcing the issue, putting pressure on the defense, getting downhill, doing all these things that Fred wishes he could do, right? Because Fred isn't a 6'8" freak of nature athlete. So in that regard, I wonder if he's playing it too safe because he's trying to emulate too much of what Fred brought to this team. And he's not Fred VanVleet. He's Amen Thompson. He needs to play that way. And the sooner that he kind of like settles into that and gets back to his identity as a player, but in this role with the ball in his hands, the better this team will be for it at the end of the day. We've been on Amen a lot for this, but like really quick thoughts on Reed Sheppard. I know we talked about him earlier in the show, but how are you feeling about the stock watch on Reed as a point guard?
Man, the stock watch on Reed is the highest it's ever been.
Sky high.
It's sky high, man. I mean, he's as advertised right now. One of my biggest issues with Reed Sheppard coming out of the draft.
Also, wait, hang on. We screwed this whole thing up. Are we both buying Amen? I think we're both still buying Amen Thompson stock. Like we're still like in like, even though like the everything we just said, we're still buying the stock. All right, go to Reed. There we go.
Yes. Right. So, but Reed, like I said, one of my biggest things that I always wondered about Reed, his ability, his superstar upside ability will be, yes, this guy's this elite shooter, but will at his size be able to get up enough shots to tap in to that elite 3-point shooting? And at this point, I think so. I mean, the range at which he's taking some of these 3-point shots just the small bit of daylight.
Casual 30-foot bombs, the snatch back on Desmond Bain, like creating some separation, like and not even like a ton, just enough separation with that super quick release, and it's over.
Yeah, man. I the all-star superstar upside is still very much there, man. And once I think the final step will be, of course, he needs to be an average defender. If he just stays at the level of defender he is now, but becomes a nuclear offensive player, I think it'll be just fine, right? But also, we all know that Reed Sheppard has probably one of the best court visions on this team, right? His IQ, his ability to make reads, no pun intended, but his ability to make other players better is something the Rockets sorely need, right, to force the issue. And I think once he puts all that together, he's going to be our starting point guard. And we have something really big to look forward to in a core with Amen Thompson, Alperen Sengun, and Reed Sheppard as leading force, as all-star level players on this team. Definitely all in on Reed right now, man.
All in as well. The buy-in is there. And look, you said it, but the way that those three in particular, the way that their skill sets all kind of mesh with one another, the fact that Reed is such a lights out shooter, and now Alperen Sengun has turned himself into a knockdown 3-point shooter. Even if Amen Thompson doesn't ever develop like a consistent outside game, you've got those two guys balancing him out. Even if Reed Sheppard is never a true table setting point guard, you've got a table setting big man in Alperen Sengun who can run the offense, and you've got a great connective tissue piece guy in Amen Thompson who also has great court vision. And so you've got two guys that can be really elite secondary creators off of your primary creator in the big fella. And so there's so much to like about them as a trio and how their games all complement one another. And I think that you're starting to see a little bit of the vision as to why those guys were selected, and seeing how those skill sets kind of overlap and will complement each other. And then when you plug in a future first ballot Hall of Famer like KD, as well as the other kind of supporting role guys, the Jabaris and Taris of the world, it's really easy to see how this team, not only being able to compete at the highest level this season right now, trying to vie for a title with KD, but they've still got a super bright future, even in whatever the post KD era looks like, hopefully like 5 years from now. Hopefully KD plays into his like early 40s. But with that, those are our final thoughts on this one. We want your thoughts on Reed Sheppard and his growth and development, and what's impressed you the most about him so far this season. When do you think Reed Sheppard should potentially start for this Rockets team? Give us your thoughts in the comments. Give us your thoughts about Amen Thompson, him balancing these roles, the kind of defensive regression a little bit that we've seen from him. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Madison, you know the drill. Let everybody know where to track you down at.
Follow me on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. Come talk Rockets basketball and NBA draft.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thanks so much for checking out the show. Remember, the best way to help us grow the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.